Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah. I am here with Nicole L. Mason, who is a former divorce attorney. Why can I not say that? Former divorce attorney. It's probably because it's such a terrible, traumatic word, right? It's like divorce attorney. It's like, let me just stumble on that for a second. So my divorce attorney says I should be a lawyer. He's like, you totally missed your calling, Sarah. And I was like, I have. You should.
Right.
So you actually helped your clients get back together, right? When you were teaching them different communication strategies, and now you are a relationship specialist, right?
Yeah. So totally unintentional. I was a child of divorce, so I went into divorce law to help make the process easier for co-parenting adults. Turns out when you tweak some communication things, not even like big things, just like I was always looking forward to, like, you're going to still spend the rest of your life in each other's lives if you share children, like graduations and weddings and grandkids and all that. So you still have to like learn how to be with that person and interact with them. So some of these things are going to have to change. So that was my intention. Turns out when you just tweak some of those little things in many marriages, not all, of course, divorce is always a viable option for for things like abuse and that kind of stuff. But many marriages can be saved just through those little small changes. So,
and our listeners, there's going to be three type of people listening to what you just said. So some people are going to say, can my marriage be saved? I'm interested in these healthy communication strategies. Some people are going to say, whoa, I'm co-parenting and it's really difficult after a divorce. That's, how can I have those conversations? And some people are going to say, hey, I had some really unhealthy patterns in my last marriage. My last relationship, how do I bring a better sense of communication into my new relationship?
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are definitely the three people listening interested in what you're saying, Nicole. So what are some big mistakes you see in communication?
Taking everything personally, even though it's usually not personal. It's usually whatever's going on with you. So like if you think, like, for example, the other day I woke up just in a terrible mood. No reason, like nothing was going wrong, but my partner, I was like, I just need some time. Please don't like ask me to do anything.
This past Monday?
What was that?
May I ask if it was this past Monday?
Yes, it was. What was going on?
Oh my gosh, no, there's these people, all this stuff that I'm studying now with like changes and energy and metaphysics and all this kind of stuff. And they were talking like basically, and I'm going to sound super woo-woo. My podcast is very practical, not typically about woo-woo. But it was this whole conversation about like the eclipse coming and like energy shifts and like kind of like it bringing up people who are doing the work, right? And they're interconnected. And so as we kind of feel humanity's energy and stuff, like it was like interesting. Everybody was talking about what a bad mood they were in Monday, including me. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna have to. Was it Monday? So, what date would that have been for anyone interested in what was like November? What was Monday? Because I'm listening to some podcasts and stuff. Yes, November 7th. So if anyone else was in a bad mood, November 7th, give yourself some grace, and it's fascinating when you start studying connection and connectedness. And just to your point that it's not personal. Right? Like I was like
nothing to do with anyone.
Monday. And all these people that I'm listening about the eclipse, like they were in like a bad mood Monday. Okay, perfect example of what you were saying. And now we're connected. We're like soul sisters already.
Yes.
That's awesome, Nicole. So yes, don't make it personal. What else?
Learning how to do conflict. So like that on Monday, that could have blown up into something huge if I wouldn't have been like, oh, I feel really weird today. I'm not sure what's going on. It has nothing to do with you, but please don't Like, please just leave me alone. Let me do my thing, work through it. I'll come back later. It'll be fine. Like, you didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't have to be a big old thing, but it very well could have been.
Mhm.
So learning how to manage that, which mostly is learning how to manage yourself and your own emotions, and just asking for that space and that time where, I mean, I'm a verbal processor, so I like to talk things out, but sometimes that's not helpful. And sometimes that just amplifies and adds fuel to the fire.
Well, and it's knowing in my own life, not with my husband, but in my own life, there were some hard conversations I've had to have recently.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, my job is to show up to this conversation as my best self, my
Yep.
least triggered, least
Mhm.
emotional, well rested, because it was a very big conversation,
Mm,
right?
mhm. Yeah.
And and that they were kind of like, well, let's talk as quickly as possible. I was like, no,
Mm.
that would go well for me.
Right.
And not go well for me as in the conflict being resolved or even me getting my way, and I'm putting that in air
Right.
quotes for anyone listening to the podcast. But also just me with the personal integrity of, did I actually say what I meant,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
did I vent
Mhm.
and complain and
Yeah.
yell and feed those, like,
Or get overwhelmed and
or get
flooded with
overwhelmed,
emotions.
get flooded with emotionally flooded, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so keeping it, remembering it's not always personal, showing up to conversations as your best self
Right.
and being
Mhm.
aware of your own stuff as you get
Yes.
into conversations. Yeah, what else?
And then the third big thing is actually dealing with things. So we all like, when you talk about anger, you usually talk about, oh, it simmered and then I blew up. Well, if you think of like a stew pot on your stove, if you have this pot that's simmering and you keep throwing potatoes and like the tops of celery that don't even necessarily belong in a stew, like if you throw all this stuff in it, it's going to blow up, it's going to boil over, it's going to stink, it's going to make a huge mess. Like, just put the things in there that need to be in there. Throw the other stuff in the trash that doesn't have to be in there, shouldn't be in there, might make you sick if you put it in there. And like, don't keep like put the lid on the pot, like close it up, deal with it. Uh Figure out how it's going to work in your life rather than just, oh, I'm done talking about this, I can't do this anymore. Like, if you are emotionally flooded, then yeah, take a pause, but don't keep throwing stuff in there. Like, you have to come back to it and deal with it at some point.
And that's really important, especially for women who have been in a unhealthy relationship and are looking for a healthy relationship. If you cannot ask for what you want or need from
Right.
a store clerk, a librarian, a lawyer, a
Mhm.
whatever else, right? Then I don't want to say your relationship's doomed or anything like that, but
Right.
it is a unfair burden. I saw this
Mhm.
post today, and it was about men saying, "Hey, what's wrong?" And women going, "Nothing.
Mhm.
You have to guess.
Yep.
The thing you have to guess."
Mhm.
Do not do that. It is so passive aggressive. It is so unkind,
Yes, to
right?
yourself too.
To yourself. And it's really a different way of controlling,
Yeah.
right? It's like, well, you guess what's wrong. I want to be the
Mhm.
focus of attention, so you guess what's wrong.
Right. You should know, don't you love me enough to know?
Mm, yeah.
Which is
Or
not how it works.
you're not my soulmate if you can't
Right.
guess.
Right.
Right? We must not be right for each other if you can't guess.
Mhm.
So definitely that piece.
Which is so interesting because, like, if all of us have had this happen, but where someone does something like with good intentions. So, oh, I bought you this cookie, or I did this thing for you. And you're like, why did you do that? Like, I would have never done that, or I don't like that. Like, even somebody who, like, you don't have any issues with, maybe they're your best friend, but they just miss the mark because we're all human. Sometimes we think somebody wants something because we want it or would want it. And it's just not, I mean, we can't read each other's minds. So especially if there's any conflicts or communication missing there, like that is a very unfair situation to put both of the people in.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know for your own self what you want, and
Mhm.
then to expect someone else to guess what you want, uh, it's just unkind. I think about it as being unkind. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what point three, I feel like, is most interesting in learning new healthy relationships, or even fixing your current relationship. Point number two, the pause and showing up as your best self, seems like the most important thing in the co-parenting
Yes.
conversation, right? Like not
Yes.
writing that text when you're angry. Is that kind of
Oh,
what you've seen?
absolutely. And if you can get past texting when you've got emotions happening, that is ideal. I know sometimes that's not possible because some things are time sensitive, especially when you're co-parenting. Um, but just being able to take that step back and like think, is this really how I want to come across? Is this going to be helpful, or is it going to harm myself or my child or my interactions in the future? Um, is this something that I'm feeling defensive about? Am I feeling vulnerable about? Am I trying to like avoid something? Like, what's really going on there for you? Um, if you can take that time, definitely that is ideal. But if you can't, then figure out where in your body that feeling is. So another thing that, I mean, I wish it was taught in schools, especially when we were growing up, but even now would be really helpful, is like actually knowing what feelings are and
Mhm.
like emotions. Like emotions are called feelings because you have a feeling, a sensation in your body. So figure out where that is, what's happening, what that sensation is. So if it's like a tightening in your chest or your hands getting sweaty or your heart racing or whatever, and then you can always, and this is going to sound kind of woo woo too, but you can always like concentrate in on that feeling, focus on it, on that sensation, and figure out what your body's trying to tell you.
Mhm.
So even if it's, oh, I'm nervous of how this is going to go, or I'm really upset that this happened and now I have to do this and this and this when I shouldn't have had to do any of it. Like whatever that's trying to tell you, and then take that approach. Like don't take all the feelings, but take the meaning and the message that sensation is triggering for you.
That's one of my favorite conversations around safe or unsafe people.
Yes.
And I, if there was a beautiful beach and ocean and beautiful water and perfect sand and the perfect landscape and flowers, and there was a crocodile, what would your body pay attention to?
The crocodile for sure.
Crocodile, right? And sometimes when people say, "Oh, I'm," there's two extremes, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes people say everything is a crocodile, and they've gotten to the point that their nervous system is so
Mhm.
aggravated, they've been in fight and flight for so long
Yeah.
that just everything feels like a crocodile and they're always triggered. And
Mhm.
some people, their fight and flight has gone to freeze for so long, or
Yeah.
fawn,
Yeah.
right? Their nervous system has shut down, and so there's a crocodile gnawing off their arm and they're like,
Mhm.
well, it's fine. And they come to me and they usually say something along the lines of, how do I not get triggered by crocodiles? I'm like, you need to be triggered by crocodiles, right?
Right.
There, you're at your arm's about to fall off, and
Mhm.
you don't notice because you've been numb to it for so long.
Yeah.
So getting that healthy nervous system and those feelings of like,
Mhm.
you want your resting state to be restful,
Yes.
right? And then when there is a trigger that comes along and it tells you something's wrong through that feeling,
Mhm.
right? You
Yeah.
notice. And
Right.
is that how you would describe like the healthy middle ground?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's literally just taking that time. Like, it's not hard to do, but you have to stop yourself and take that time to notice. So
Mhm.
you can't spin down that spiral, which is the hardest part for for any of us, is to stop that spiral, because our body is used to that feeling. It's a habit. It's an automatic response. So it's not going to be perfect if you're just starting your journey. You might not notice until after you've already blown up, after you've already sent that nasty text. But if you can, even after you sent it, if you can, even if it's like an hour later, be like, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have sent that. This is actually what I meant.
Mm.
That can help get to the point where you want to be. And you notice earlier and earlier and earlier. It's something that you have to give yourself grace for, because it's not going to happen overnight, but it's well worth the time and the effort to notice.
Well, if there's a crocodile attacking you and
Mhm,
your body gets flooded with that fight and flight energy,
mhm.
right? Back in the day, we would run away from the crocodile. We would use
Right.
that energy to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And now in the world of emails and text messages,
Mhm.
our
Being
ancient
on all the time.
brain, right? And so we're still getting that energy to
Mhm.
protect ourselves,
Yeah.
but it's not running away from a crocodile or a buffalo or whatever else, right? It's
Right.
like, you better not say I'm that type of mother. You better
Mhm.
not, right? And so
Right.
I like to remind people of that, because the energy is there to keep you safe. It's a good thing,
Yes. Right. Right.
right?
That's how we're all here.
We will exist, right? Our ancestors that survived ran away from the crocodile. But if you don't want to create an extra crocodile or appear to be a crocodile yourself,
Right.
if you're immediately sending yucky texts, especially in regards to divorce law and
Mhm.
co-parenting, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Especially if you're going through the divorce process
Mhm.
correctly. You want to keep all that communication as neutral as possible.
Mhm, mhm. Um, I know this wasn't the focus of the podcast, but what are some, from a legal perspective or a judicial perspective, the advantages of looking and appearing to be the neutral one, or the, you know,
Yeah.
I talk about your parenting brand. So we want our
Oh,
parenting
mhm,
brand to be
mhm.
neutral and helpful and
Yes.
non-emotional,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, not only is that good for you and your children, but it's also good for the judge. I mean, there is there's not so much, and this is not legal advice by any means. This is my personal opinion based on my experience. But there's no, like, mothers don't get the automatic parenting consideration anymore. It's in most states, it's pretty split, 50-50, as often as it can be. But you can, I mean, there's still things like legal um, custody where you get to be the decision maker for all decisions of your children. So, I mean, in those scenarios, it's important to be regarded as the safe one, the responsible parent, the neutral parent who's going to consider all sides, not just for yourself, but for your child and your soon to be ex spouse. So, a judge wants to give the child the best possible life, but they also don't want to see you back in their courtroom. So that's kind of the perspective that they're coming from. Where can I give this child the most stability, and where can I give these parents the best opportunity to succeed on their own without having to come back and me deal with their problems, to be quite honest.
And I am glad you said that. I've had several lawyers get interviewed here, and I think it's very frustrating from, someone who's been through a divorce and that kind of thing. They call it the justice system, right?
Yes.
And people want it to be just, if I may say it that way, right? And
Mhm.
they want to, like, and there's this idea that's like, oh, this has been crazy stuff happening. Once people see what's happening, they're obviously going to take my side. And it's very frustrating to hear, really, they just don't want to have to deal with you.
Right.
And I'm going to say that I'm not a lawyer, so I will say that is ton. If you're listening to the podcast, you can go back. I've done tons of conversations with divorce lawyers. I've had several people my clients who are talking to lawyers, and they say, I don't know who this woman is, but you need to listen to her because she knows what she's talking about. It's me. I'm not
Love that.
right. Oh yeah, all over the world, right? I'm like, okay, really? They don't really. They just want you to go away. I hate to say it that way. They want to like make you go away. And really there's this whole idea. And I want to have compassion in this conversation, because depending on where you are in your journey, that can feel very disheartening.
Right.
And it is very sad.
Well,
Nicole,
but at the same time, that's not their role.
Mhm.
Like, that's not a court's role, is to hash out all your differences and see who's the better person. It's all about, I mean, legally separating you two as individuals and figuring out how to piece in the things that can be separated. So your children, your pets, your, if you have a business together or retirement accounts, those kind of things. Like, that is ultimately what the justice system is for, is to deal with those things that if individuals can't deal with it on their own. So they're not there to say whether you're a good person or whether you're the best parent or whether you have valid reasons to be upset and annoyed and emotional and sad. Like, that's just not what they're there for. And it couldn't be. I mean, they're backed up already as it is. So it's just not feasible, and that's not their role either. So I try to be really sensitive about that too. I had divorce clients who told me that they've always felt like they left a counseling session instead of a meeting with their divorce attorney, because I took that role on, which most divorce attorneys don't do that either. But I have a psychology degree. My undergrad's in psychology. So that was kind of what I liked about divorce law, was being able to put those pieces back together that maybe weren't the focus of the legal proceeding, but still needed dealt with. So.
And I call that, in my new book, Problem Solved, there's the emotional problems to solve, the practical problems to solve, and the legal problems to solve.
Yep.
And it's
they are very different.
Very different. Just like you and I were talking, the call I had, like, that I was like trying, to respect her and not get off the phone very quickly. It was like, here's the emotional problems, here's the legal problems, here's the practical problem. Like, let's separate out those as much as possible. And one of my biggest pieces of legal advice is, do not use, I'm glad that you were able to do that, but it is very expensive to use your lawyer as your counselor.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, it absolutely is.
Crazy.
And most are not good at it either.
And most are not good at it. And they're not supposed to be.
Right. No.
Right. They're not supposed to be. And I think that is a lot of the confusion going into the divorce process. What is the judge's job? What is the lawyer's job?
Yep.
What is this? Because if people oftentimes in the legal process are looking for a savior and a warrior.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of the reasons.
Shark attorney, that bulldog. And you would be shocked at how many people want to do something just for the principle. So, no, I don't want to settle this. I don't agree to that because it's the principle of it. Well, I understand that, but that's not helpful.
I call it, starve your ego, feed your soul.
Yes.
Right. And we're hitting so many of my points, that we're so aligned on, but it's like, that is one of my biggest pieces of advice is throw out reason.
Yes.
But like, this isn't fair.
Right.
This isn't principle. Like, we need to just like put that to the side and focus on strategy. What do you really want? What's most important? What are your priorities on what you want?
Right.
And then being able to communicate those. And not, I mean, it will save you thousands and thousands and
Oh,
thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
yes. And likely months and sometimes years of time. I mean,
Mm,
there are divorces that can last 5 years and
mm, mm,
it doesn't have to.
mm.
Um, there's something you mentioned. Oh, and the why. Why do you want that? Because sometimes you want something, but when you figure out why you want it, there's better ways to get it.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. I call that around the house problem solving. Yes, yeah, that's exactly it, right? And it's like, so I imagine like, so your ex-husband or whatever is like going to the front door and, or you're going to a party in the backyard and your ex-husband is in charge of opening the door to the
Yep.
party,
Yep.
right?
I just read that chapter in
Oh,
your
you
book.
just read that?
So good.
Yes! You're knocking, you're like, "Let me in, let me in." They're like, "No, I'm not letting you in," and it's like, "Just go around the house. Just
Right.
go to the front
You
door."
don't you don't have to crash it down.
No,
Or
yes.
like I say you don't have to burn the house down
Yeah.
to get whatever you want. Like you don't have to start over, you don't have to walk away and like ruin everything. You like there are ways to get this dealt with
Mhm, mhm.
without making it so hard on yourself and others. Like
Y
because if it's hard on you, it's going to be hard on somebody else too.
Absolutely, and it is so hard to see the water you're in. If you're the fish swimming
Mhm.
in the water, right?
Yes.
It
Yep.
is so hard to see, and that is why, I mean, I wasn't planning for this to be a plug for coaches, but I mean, it is
Yes.
just the amount of money you can save and
Hmm.
the heartache you can save
Yeah.
and and it is again exactly the conversation I had before this call, and I was like, well, I understand the emotional problem you're trying to solve.
Hmm.
Has anyone ever held him accountable
Right.
in a way that he changed? How old is
Mhm.
he? In his 50s. Okay, you've known him for long, like you've been married 30 years. Okay. Has anyone ever held him accountable in a way that he did the right thing?
Right.
No. You can't think of one example in 30 years.
And
Okay,
this
so
is likely one of the reasons you're divorcing him.
right, exactly. I was like, so your strategy this time is if you
Mhm.
get enough people to put pressure on him, not legal pressure. This is like society, right? So you're getting legal pressure is different, right? Your
Right.
plan now is to get enough friends and family on your side to put pressure on him to do the right thing, but it's never worked in 30 years. And I'm saying it in a way, I hope, and I know you don't think I sound callous.
Right.
I am quite aware of how terrible the things I'm
Right.
saying. You
Yes.
are quite aware and like how hard that is to hear,
Hmm.
and the empathy and sympathy. And, in the way I was talking to her, I said, I cannot ethically get off the phone with you
Hmm.
without pointing out
Yeah.
the pitfalls in this strategy.
Right. Well, and
I
even the likelihood that all of those people that you're lobbying are going to want to insert themselves into an issue that doesn't really have anything to do with them.
Mhm, mhm. Which is heartbreaking. And anybody listening to this, what, the judge isn't there to help me? That this isn't like, oh, I don't want it to be heartbreaking. There is hope.
Yes,
There is
absolutely.
absolute hope. It's in the mirror. I wish there was another way. I wish there was another way, right?
Hmm.
But the way is becoming your own warrior, your own
Yeah.
superhero, your own advocate, your own I'm going to add strategist. I know a lot of people are
Yeah.
kind of saying the warrior thing, but you know, having a strategy that actually works.
Yes.
Whether it be a communication strategy, a legal
Mhm.
strategy. Nicole, how often, whether it be the communication conversation or your experience just in life in general, do you see people not connecting dots?
All the time.
Wh-
Literally all the time.
And it's
Or connecting the wrong dots. To-
connecting the wrong dots. So, you know what I mean by that. If a
Mhm.
listener is like, "What are they talking about connecting the dots?" Where do you see this going wrong? Because it's heartbreaking for me. I see these women.
Mhm.
I work mainly with women. They are trying so hard.
Yeah.
And they're putting so much effort, and then hiring a burnout coach. And it's like, you don't need a burnout coach. Your strategy wasn't aligned to your outcome at all,
Right.
right? So, what do you see this? Where do you see this play out?
So, I mean, everywhere. And I mean, we're human beings. So we're in our head a lot. a lot more than we probably need to be. And that's not just for women, that's for men too. Um, Actually, that's kind of how I became good at relationships, actually, is when I was, so my parents got divorced when I was little, like um, five, like kindergarten was the last time we lived in the same house. Um, but my mom and I would move out, we'd move back in, we'd move out, we'd move back in. Like it was a long, drawn out process. But I could always see, like, even though I was like under 5, under 10, I could always see like my parents just passing by each other, nothing landing that they were talking about, like making assumptions that were not accurate. Like it's very weird now as an adult to think that I could see that, or like maybe more of it was like sense it, feel it, as a young child. But like it doesn't have to be that way. Um, a lot of it, really and truly, I learned this in my divorce practice, was just not assuming that you're on the same team or that another person has good intentions for you. Like they're not just out for themselves, which I know it feels that way. I mean, I've been in those relationships too, where it feels like, what, I can't do anything right. Or like, why are you not sticking up for me? Well, there's a lot more to it than just that. Like you have to see all the context, um, and ask. I mean, be curious about it is a huge thing. And you have to take that role too of informing them of what you want or why you're saying something or what your experience as a 14-year-old was that is making this happen or making you do this or want this or whatever. So there's lots of reasons for it, but I think those are the big ways to kind of try and avoid it as much as possible.
And when I think about it, I was just helping my daughter study for a test that she's taking
Mhm.
on this progressive era, which was like
Ah,
women's suffrage, child labor laws, and
mhm,
prohibition. So
mhm.
two stuff, one didn't. It was really interesting was we think about times in history, it was 100 years ago that women weren't owning property. Like,
Yeah.
golly bum, that is a short
Mhm.
jump away,
Right.
especially when I was born.
Right.
Right? Like, that was
Yeah.
60 years before I was born. They took
Mhm. Isn't that wild?
crazy and terrible, and, like, my grandmother's 89.
Mhm.
Like, it's so close in our
Yeah.
time in history, and it's interesting and frustrating the quote unquote war that we're in, in times
Mhm.
of it's in times of real peace and prosperity for the
Right.
most part,
Yeah.
in consideration of like human history and like
Yeah.
people being thrown to lions in the Colosseum, right? Like we had it easy. It doesn't feel easy, but like
Right.
we had some things really easy. Or from my perspective of, I don't want to, I know different cultures and people listening to this all over the world. I'm saying from my
Yeah.
perspective of in my body and the time of prosperity in America is where I'm speaking from in this. The We've had time to do some work in these inner wars of breaking generational ties, breaking those generational cycles, you know, um, understanding like even emotional abuse. Like that wasn't like a
Mhm.
thing. It wasn't
No.
illegal to hit your wife until like 1970 something,
Yeah.
73. Is that
Well,
right?
and yeah, something like that. And I
Yeah.
mean, you could rape your wife up until like the 80s.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Mhm.
things have changed quite drastically.
And this is a very new, just like when I think
Mhm.
about that time 100 years ago, where it's like, whoa, whoa, like, yeah, child labor laws. That's common sense now that we should
Right.
not be like having 6-year-olds work instead of go to
Mhm.
school. Like, that's common sense
Right.
now. It wasn't at that
No.
time. Yeah. Yeah, women should be able to go to college. That's common sense now. That
Mhm.
wasn't at the time. And I definitely feel like we're in this new, what you're talking about.
Mhm.
in this self-awareness, in this seeing
Yes.
what your parents went through. What we're talking about is this, what I feel like the war many of us in, especially in the personal growth world,
Mhm.
are in,
Yeah.
is breaking these generational cycles, breaking
Mhm.
these assumptions of like, well, I get to hit you because I'm your parent. That's why.
Right.
Like, this is so, I mean, this is very new in our
Mhm.
time period, right? And those of us doing or yeah, just because we're married doesn't mean you can hit me
Right. Mhm.
or call me
Or
bitch
talk to me that way. Yeah.
or talk to
Yeah.
me that way, right? Like this is so new. And so
Yes.
if anybody's listening to this and they're feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling exhausted, like it gives me hope in that, however many it was, it's slavery. It was like, you mean we had to have a war to decide it was illegal to own other people?
Right. Oh.
They like we had to have a war over that
Mhm.
because people thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Like it seems terrible now. And so I'm
Mhm.
hoping as we do the work of breaking these cycles, I know the listeners are doing the work of breaking these cycles.
Yeah.
100 years from now, it's like, well, of course you should like stop and have awareness, self-awareness going into
Mhm.
conversations and not
Yeah.
just what's on your mind. Like
Right.
that's my
For
hope.
our children, it's probably going to be completely second nature. They're not
Yeah.
gonna have to worry about it, hopefully. Or
I hope
maybe not our children, but their children for sure.
yeah, but our children, I know, you know, I know things are going to be different for my children
Mhm.
because of the work that I'm doing,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
right? And the healing work that I'm doing, even the healing work I'm doing with their dad, who I'm not married to anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's just gonna be a ripple effect too.
Yeah. 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 Nicole, this is great. This went a lot of different places, but this is
It
great.
did.
And tell people where they can find out more about you and your work.
Yes, so I have a Facebook community that is Love and Let Go. So you can find me on there, or Sarah and I are connected on Facebook. We're friends, so you can just friend request me too. I use my first personal page for a lot of things. So you can absolutely reach out to me there, or you can email me at Nicole at relationship-transformation.com.
And we will put all that in the show notes. Nicole, thank you for helping us learn to communicate better, both with ourselves and others, and take us a little more in our journey to becoming toxic person proof. Thanks.
Thank you.